Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Hello, everybody. It's a sad day here on the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. I'm Joel.
I'm Ryan.
Hey, I'm Michael.
And of course, Michael's joining us. It's a sad day, though, because this is the last of our three-part discussion of disaster films, which in itself is a disaster.
Yeah.
It's maybe the greatest disaster of all.
You guys.
I know.
It has, like the Irwin Allen films of the 70s, it has been an epic journey.
Mm-hmm. No
It really
question.
has. We've learned a lot about ourselves and about humanity.
For sure.
Yes.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Movie Show. So happy that you're with us for another week of disaster. Again, Michael Klug is with us. How wonderful is that? Yay!
Yay!
The
Hi.
best ever.
Real quick, Michael, you watched Hindenburg.
Woo!
Yes, and I both...
The humanity.
My husband, it was, yeah. We both adored it, and I think you guys frankly talked it down too much. Because I'm like, I was completely engaged. I loved the intrigue. I thought the ending paid off beautifully. I was really impressed, and I would rank it probably, if we went back to those 70s, I might move that up a list. So.
You
Awesome.
wouldn't have gotten much argument from us. We really, really love that film. Like I said, we just sort of put it in the context of, as a disaster movie, it only slightly delivers, you know. It is, we both really like it, though. We're thrilled that you really like it, too.
Well, I was anticipating, you guys kind of said, oh, it doesn't really pay off what you think is going to pay off. I'm like,
No.
oh, no, it paid off.
It pays off, yeah, for sure. Dramatically, it really does.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you get some Poseidon action.
Yep. I said
So-
that. I just, you know, wanted to sort of put it into context of what audiences weren't thrilled about with it when it came
Yeah.
out.
Well, we
And
were
I would
looking
say
at
for
it,
me, so much of my love for that film comes from my childhood memories of it. So I have a skewed, vision of the movie. So it's like is it really that great of a film?
It is.
But I just love it. Yeah. And so
When you
I'm
see it-
just super happy.
When you see it in high definition, in widescreen, it's seeing it again new in an adult sort of fully artistic way, and it really is
Well-
special. Joel, if you haven't watched it that way, like if you haven't watched it for years and years, you should check it out.
everything looked beautiful, like all of the artwork, and I'm like,
It's great.
I went in thinking, oh, this isn't going to be, it'll be enjoyable, but I'm like, I was very entertained, and like you guys saw, I posted on social media, it's that there's some heft to this. The
Mhm.
fact that there are people escaping Nazi Germany, and none of the intrigue really got particularly goofy. It seemed kind of subdued, which I thought was, I don't know, I loved it. I really enjoyed it. So
And
The
maybe
movie,
that was our plan
Weiss
all
knew
along.
the movie couldn't be about that.
no,
Like you say, the intrigue. If it had been that the whole time, you'd have gotten.
yeah.
You just couldn't have done a movie that way. So they just keep reminding you about it and sprinkling it throughout, and it's a really clever way of doing it, I think.
Well,
Yay.
one more quick thing is that, yes, William Atherton was quite handsome. He has a great set of lips. But two, George C. Scott Young,
Yummy.
I kind of went for
when I
that.
saw you post that, I'm like, oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
then there's some supporting guy named Colby Chester who played Elliot Howell III, playing
Mhm.
cards with Anne Bancroft.
It's a really good scene, that card scene.
So, but I'm
And
thoroughly pleased with that experience.
of course, and spoiler alert, for those who haven't seen it, the final montage of the pictures and the fact that they included the dog.
Both Elwood and I were extremely pleased.
Yeah, it's
Nice.
one of those things where it's like we would have been going, did that dog live?
Yeah.
Did that dog live?
Yeah.
We
All
have
right,
to know.
So
All
I'll
right.
stop there so people skip
Even
ahead.
in 1975, they knew you had to know about
Yeah,
that.
you had to.
sure.
Yeah. All right. So also, real quick before we start on the newest list, the newest countdown, we're going to go back to last week's show where we talked about Daylight. This past week, I was fortunate enough to talk to a friend of mine, Jay O. Sanders, who was in Daylight, and he agreed to Zoom chat with me for a little bit, and I was able to ask him a few questions, and we talked. Man, the man can tell a story. He's really great.
Daylight was a particularly odd and wonderful. Strangely, I was back and forth between almost doing the main villain in an Arnold Schwarzenegger piece. It would have been that or playing with Stallone. Rob Cohen, who is the director of that, had met me years before when he brought me out to play because he wanted me to be the lead in a new TV series. Now, they brought me out to LA into a room with like 20, 30 people all sitting there looking at me, figuring out why I wasn't this enough or that enough or sexy enough or young enough or whatever, or, you know. And Rob was there and shook my hand. He was kind of irritated with these people around and had a big water bottle as everyone walked around with those big the right thing, and never heard from it again except to hear, no, it didn't work out. Last minute, didn't work out. They went a different way. Years later, I met him on Daylight, and it was just an outright offer. And he told me the story that after I had done that, they had just been full of their criticisms and, well, I don't know if he's this, and maybe he should be that. And he said, I was so angry. And I said, what do you want from this? This guy's the guy. You should just hire him. You should just. And he said, and I just reached down and I took the bottle of water and I downed the entire big bottle of water. Suddenly I just had this huge thirst. And the reason I tell you this is because he said, and I threw it down, I walked outside, went towards my car, fell down and had a heart attack. And I went, oh, fuck. He said, it's okay. Obviously I'm still here. He said, but I was conscious enough as I fell down, I thought, shit, I'm going to die here. And there was nobody walking through. And he managed to get himself up enough, get himself to his car, and drive himself to a hospital. And he said, ever since then, I've been dying to get you in a project. You're my good luck charm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
one, that's the most amazing story ever. But two, what was the Schwarzenegger villain role? Do you know?
Eraser. Yeah, it was between him and
right?
James Caan, and they obviously went with James Caan for obvious reasons.
He that's a bigger role, but Eraser is garbage. You know, Daylight's a decent enough movie, so he
I
made
like
out okay
Eraser.
there. Well,
Yeah.
Eraser can be enjoyable, I suppose, but it's not a good movie by any stretch.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, he and the show that he was up for, he talked a little bit, as you can tell from the video. I edited a giant, that was like a 20-minute conversation, just that story. So but he was up for, it was going to be like a sort of a Mindhunter, Silence of the Lambsy type TV show before any of those things had ever come out. So it was just Rob Cohen had this idea for this show that was sort of ahead of its time, and the network didn't get it. It ended up going to pilot with a different actor and never getting picked up. So he was like,
a cool story.
Everything went
And
okay
a
there.
Pretty decent Rob Cohen impression, I have to say.
Well, wait till we get to his Stallone.
Okay.
So all right. So
Is that next? Are we going to do these two more Daylight clips?
Yeah, sure. I can do those real quick.
We
Now,
should.
let's
That
see.
first one was awesome.
How about this Claire Bloom one is real quick here.
Cool.
Claire Bloom, I got to be good buddies with on the thing, who had taken the thing as a money job, as we all do, to, but she couldn't bring herself to read the script because it was like, I just have to do this, and I'm going to be in Rome. And her daughter was an opera singer who was there in Rome, and anyway, she made the mistake of reading the script on the plane and went, "Oh no! What have I?
What have I gotten myself into?"
Yep. So Claire
You
Bloom.
get to work with Claire Bloom. I mean, come on.
Yeah, in the last clip, I'm not sure if I have it, if I edited this part out, but he talked about how, I know I edited this out. So they would, I mean, because they were in Rome, they always were going out as a group. So it's like, Claire Bloom, Amy Brenneman, all these people, except for Stallone, who kind of kept to himself. But they would go out, and it's Rome, Italy, so they're, eating giant pasta meals at like 10 p.m. and drinking wine until 1. And, so he said they all got to be really good friends. The one thing he did talk about, though, is he gained so much weight during the production of Daylight because they were out eating all the time. He's like, so if you watch it knowing that, you just watch my character get fatter and fatter and fatter. And he was like, so I decided to say that I was playing that these were the gases, the toxic gases that were trapped in there.
But didn't you say, Ryan Harris, that they shot this mostly in sequence, right?
Mostly. That's what the IMDb trivia page says, yes.
You would see
that is a perfect segue. That's a perfect segue to this clip right here.
I knew it.
The whole thing took place in New York, but we shot the whole thing in Rome. So we went to Rome for almost 5 months and filmed at Cinecittà. Raffaella De Laurentiis produced it. They provided all of us with beautiful apartments, and we'd go off and shoot for the day at Cinecittà on a quarter to almost half mile of tunnel recreated, and it had been, every tile had been laid. It was like maybe a foot or two wider than the actual tunnel, so they had more room to maneuver around in it.
Okay,
but they recreated the whole thing, and they connected it to a water tank so they could pump in water to flood our set as we needed it.
Mm-hmm.
But they had to do it in real time, because the place had to degrade gradually, and you're not going to bring it back together after something's come in. So a section caves in. From that point on, that's caved in.
A
certain amount of water is in. Now they could take some water out, put it back in, but we had like 2,000 real rats that were descendants of Willard, we were told. They had a great time, and Stallone, who was pretty much to himself, but he was very kind with me, and he's always whatever, we do this, we're gonna go. Don't worry, get out. We could, whatever, it'll work.
So that's Willard rats.
Whatever. I don't even know.
Yeah. So he had all sorts of great stories. But yeah, so they shot it in sequence because of the flooding, and he did say that all of like the little debris and stuff that you would see floating around in the water, it was just shredded up spinach. Spinach to look like whatever, to look like refuse. So that's J.O. Sanders. That's J.O. Sanders talking about Daylight. He had nothing but really great things to say about it. He because they shot it in sequence, there were long stretches of days where he was not needed. And so he and his wife and his 1-year-old son just got to go and travel all around Italy. So it's like, man, that's a tough gig.
That's terrible.
Not a bad deal.
Yeah, he's like, it's still the greatest location shoot I have ever.
Oh God.
Ever been a part of. So.
Yay.
Yeah. So that's Jay. And we will see a little bit more of Jay later on. Yeah. So all right. How about we do ourselves a little bit of a countdown.
10 seconds. 9,
9,
8,
8,
7,
7,
6,
6,
5,
5, 4,
3,
3, 2, 1.
Yay, the countdown.
So we have a few notes we have to say about the countdown before we start. Mostly just movies that didn't make the countdown.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So these are disaster films in the in the 2000s, and when disaster films especially started to become very CGI heavy as our CGI technology got up. But so some really good movies that we won't be talking about. Finest Hours.
Only the Brave.
Only the Brave.
These are all in
Deepwater
the last
Horizon.
few years. There have been some rescue movies that are really about rescues, and the storm or the fire isn't really the star of the movie, if that makes sense. But I really do kind of consider them disaster movies. But with maybe one exception, at least I sort of left those off of my list. The other disaster movies that I thought of that I have labeled as disaster movies, for lack of a better way to label them, are, because if you look at them as fictions and as whatever, they really are, they do follow the disaster template, are World Trade Center and especially United 93, which is the best airplane hijacking movie that will ever be made. It's shockingly real and nearly perfect in its execution, but it doesn't seem to fit very comfortably alongside the movies Michael and I wanted to celebrate as, that are big, fun disaster films.
I've never seen World Trade Center. I just heard it was always too cheesy on the nose.
Yeah,
I do remember United 93. I don't remember the details. I just remember that I never wanted to see it again.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of how I feel about it too.
Recall.
It's like, I'm happy that I saw it. Like you said, Ryan, great film. I'm never going to watch it again.
No. But those, they are kind of disaster movies. They're all those stories, even Finest Hour, all true life stories. We got a couple on the list, but mostly when it becomes to be about sort of the real life details and stuff, and you move away from the fantasy of the big disaster, we sort of steered clear of those, both of us. So we wanted to give a shout out to them because, like I say, United 93, I think Only the Brave is one of the great sort of working class rah-rah.
I don't even know what that is.
Krasinski, the guy who made Oblivion and Tron Legacy, directed a movie, a true life story about forest fire fighters.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And it's got Josh Brolin and
I remember
Miles Teller, and it's James Badge Dale. It's very, very good. Jennifer Connelly is pretty good in it.
Yeah, I remember this. Yeah.
And another lesser one, it's still pretty good, is Deepwater Horizon, about the disaster on the drilling platform.
Is that it's a Peter Berg film, right? Am I remembering that correct? I'm
correct.
not
I have to say, we were watching it together, my friend Jenny and me, who watch a lot of movies together, and she had certain criticisms of it, and I didn't disagree with them. But that movie puts you on the oil platform when all hell's breaking loose. You can't say that it doesn't, and that is sort of the biggest job of these. Michael, you like to quote little blips and blurbs from reviews that you remember. Here's one that stuck with me about Deepwater Horizon, and then I'll move on. Somebody was writing a review of it, and just how, from a dialogue and from a plot standpoint, Deepwater Horizon is very much the working class heroes who see all these problems coming, and then John Malkovich plays this corporate suit who's just all his fault, basically. Everything in the movie lays at this guy's door as representing everything's bad, greedy corporate. Once the movie gets going, none matters anymore. That's what happens when you get found in the middle of a disaster. But the guy who was reviewing it was like, the only mention or the only reference in the entire thing to the ecological disaster that was the destruction of that oil and the uncoupling of that oil pipe was, there's one scene where a crazy pelican breaks through this glass and comes into the control room, and it's all covered with oil, and it's freaking out, and they're all ducking and run around. Then it flies out, and the guy who wrote that review was like, with that Pelican gives by far the best performance in the entire film.
Whoa! Ouch. I mean, honestly, if you have Wahlberg in the lead, that will basically, any Pelican will take center stage.
It's got Kurt Russell too, and it's an ensemble disaster movie like so many of the great ones are, and so it's not half bad. I don't want to deter people from it, but I thought that the Pelican gives the finest performance thing was.
Hey Pelican, say hi to your mom for me.
All right, and then real quick, Michael, tell us about The Unthinkable, which is a movie you advocated for.
Well, it's a film I saw at Screamfest a couple of years ago when it was on the festival circus. It's a circuit, I guess.
It's a circus.
It is,
It's a circus.
but it's a Swedish film, and I recommended you guys see it. I know Ryan, you took it in, and I was blown away, and I suggested potentially this could be on the disaster list, but I see
it could be. It really could be.
Fit in, but
doesn't fit perfect, but
I think it's one of the most terrifying. I don't remember a movie in recent history that I was sitting on the edge of my seat in the theater for the entire film. Like
that,
I couldn't get enough.
That scene on the bridge.
Oh my God.
With the cars.
Unbelievable. There's a sequence of after things start to go bad in is it Stockholm?
Mm-hmm.
Not to give it away, but it's like a CGI / stunt sequence that goes on for 15 minutes.
Jay already let the cat out of the bag. As far as I'm going to have to leave a warning, so no worries.
But it's intense, but it also takes the first 40 minutes to develop character before anything happens. Right. It's quality. It is so
it's
good.
really, really good. Without spoiling it, I'll say this. It's really, really good. It's all the things you're saying. It's fear of the unknown on a societal scale. That's where the disaster part comes in, because you see everything breaking down and nothing working and people not behaving normal. And it's terrifying because why? What is happening? How can you stop this? We don't know. I'll say where my enthusiasm for it, which was very high, got diminished, was when an explanation for what's happening comes in.
Well,
and where my eyes actually rolled was when, without spoiling it, when a modern geopolitical reason for why it was happening kicked in. It didn't ruin the experience for me, but
the film does lose a little steam and I believe it was the same point for me where I'm like, I think in a bunker, whereas
it's got a great ending though. It's got a great big ending for a modest film.
It does dip in the second act, fine, but there's so much energy and power, and it is, you don't know what is happening until probably 60 minutes into the film. You have no idea.
Right, and he explain it to you. You're like, what?
It's still
what are you talking about?
But yeah, it's because I was expecting an invasion of a different kind.
It is that off the hook and crazy. Yeah. I wish, Joel and I have talked about it on the show, they had something magic going when we didn't know what was going on. We were committed to those characters, so they really just didn't need any of that, in my opinion. It does no good for the film itself.
But how many films have we all seen that...
There's one detail about it that you have to know how the disaster is being delivered, but beyond that, they didn't need to tell us any of that other stuff, in my opinion.
Well, that's the thing. People drop the ball constantly. You create something, like you said, magical, and then it's the landing. It's like,
it doesn't discredit the experience, though. That movie was really, really good. So.
And it is a father-son movie. That's ultimately what's at its core, so beyond all the other bigger stuff. Anyway,
and the music.
Find it, see it.
Music is part of the story, a really important part of the story early on, and the score for the film too is just. It's not like, oh, it's so good. It's like it's a small Swedish movie, but it has like this awesome Hans Zimmer sounding score. Yeah. The score is not what you're used to in a movie, and that's what's special about it. It's very, very cool.
Well, very quickly, and I'll let you guys move on, is like when I saw this film, I was so blown away, regardless of dips in the second act and every little thing. I gave it a perfect score. I'm like, I can't experience something this deeply and be this worked up and moved and not be like, here, take everything I can give you.
Sure.
So I haven't seen it since, which I know we discussed before, but it's quality. I hope
It was a
Joel
good
gets
one.
to see it too.
It was
Yeah.
a great
So the
suggestion, so I'm
Unthinkable,
glad we got it in this one.
it's a small little, it's a Swedish film. Ryan, where were you able to legally find it, or were you so it's a little difficult, but keep your eye out for it.
If anyone listens to us in England, it's really easy to stream there with English subtitles. Otherwise, you can find it all kinds of places, but finding it with subtitles in English was a 2-day challenge for me that I had to get to the bottom of it. And no, I didn't find it in a legitimate way. If I could have, I would have. I couldn't.
Yeah.
So it was frustrating.
I
And
throw it out
worse,
there as
there's a 2010 movie with Samuel L. Jackson in it with the same name, and that's everywhere. So even hunting it down is tricky because you get all this interference from.
Yeah.
Sure.
Let's throw it out as a challenge to a friend of the show, Rob Dunkelberger. He tends to be able to find some.
He's region free. He'll just buy the British Blu-ray, which I might do actually, but I couldn't do that in time to talk about it on this show. So I had to do something else.
Sure. All right, so those are movies that, even though we just talked about them, we're not going to talk about them. But we have now. This is a big deal here on the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. This week for these disaster films, we have 2 competing top 5 lists. So let's start with our guest. He is our guest. We welcome him. We love him. Number 5 for Michael is the updated remake, the latest version of Poseidon.
Yeah, I mean, I revisited this just a couple of days ago, because I saw it in the theater and I remember greatly enjoying it. But when I looked at it recently, I'm like, 98 minutes? I mean, it's nothing. And it has no...
It's but a trifle.
It is. And but the characters are enough. You don't get the same level of magic and insights to the characters in the original. But the set pieces are exciting. I care enough about the people that I'm like, yes, let's do it.
They live and breathe it on, because if the remake of Poseidon was terrible, I'd be happy to call it terrible. It just isn't. It really does recreate the tension and the relationships and stuff that the original film had. It's a worthy big CGI tribute to that. Yeah. I will just say that in Wolfgang Petersen's defense, that script and his director's final cut of that film was about 15-ish, 16 minutes longer in the opening act, which all got cut. Yeah. And then there were a 3 character moments spread throughout the last 2 acts, which are mostly intact, that were also cut. So the only thing that movie lost to get to that 98-minute special extra screening a day number by the studio was character stuff that director thought should be in it. So he made a strong enough character movie that most of that survives, but there's a few characters in there we should really know better, given the stowaway, for example, and there's a few others that have actual stories that are important.
Now, is that director's cut available anywhere?
No. Yeah, that's what I say. If you're gonna do that to the guy, at least when it comes out on video, slap his cut out there. It's done. It's got music. It's done. But they didn't do it. But movie,
it's a very entertaining film, and like I said, you get enough that it's such a. It still has that level of, as I tried to describe last week, that it makes me uncomfortable thing. But frankly, it was just as a side note. Fergie's terrible in it. She sings great.
She doesn't do anything in it.
No, but she has a moment where she goes to Andre Braugher's character, and they have apparently they have a relationship. I don't know.
No, it's just they're both zen enough to realize that they're in their last moments. I think the humanity around them is panicking.
Yeah.
And she looks to him, to her captain, who she knows, because it's just a pleasure cruise ship. And she can see on his face, no.
Yeah, we're done.
No, there's nowhere to go. We're done. And they come together and embrace. And I really do think that's all there is to it. We're going to accept this, and we're not going to be alone in this moment. I actually really like that moment.
Really? Well,
for that reason.
An interesting little thing is that after I saw this film, because I had on my blog for 100 years what I called my stew of sin, which was my celebrity hot tub. And, there's a few females in there, but I added Fergie based on her appearance in Poseidon because I thought she looked so hot in her red dress. Anyway.
She's cute. She's cute and she's fun. She's the Charo character from Love Boat of this cruise. And it comes off exactly the way it's supposed to. And like I said, the captain, Andre Braugher, plays the anti-voice of reason, everything's going to be fine. I mean, he's really responsible for all those people not at least trying to escape. And he knows that in the end too. Braugher is A+, and I thought that moment totally worked. Well, and everything else Fergie does is, stand there, wiggle her hips, and sing these stupid songs. Like, there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, one more quick thing is interesting to me and I think this really delineates the difference between the original and the sequel or the remake, is that I look at like Roddy McDowall's Akers character in the original, and Freddie Rodriguez from 6 Feet Under. And I think what's interesting is I really feel like I knew Akers and I liked him, I trusted him. And then, what his fate is in the original, it comes as a bigger shock. And I feel like that's interesting that I cared more about McDowall's character, whereas Rodriguez's character was just kind of a throwaway.
Rodriguez's character and his friend that he sneaks on board, their plot, whatever their story is the thing that really got caught the most.
Yeah.
Because it's barely in there, and it's
a very enjoyable movie.
It's got Kevin Dillon being a super douche. That's always entertaining.
Yeah.
What a stretch. So the Ryan's number 5 movie. Whoop. Sorry, I lost my earpiece there. Ryan's number 5 movie is The Core.
Okay, I'm just getting The Core on here because The Core is not very good. I don't know that it's better than Poseidon. It probably isn't. I do like it better than some of the other movies of its style. The world is ending and we need to stop it that are coming up. And the only reason I like it, there's a couple of reasons. One is key. There's a scene where, because of this electromagnetic field of the Earth failing, the coordinates and the electronics on the space shuttle get all scrambled, and they land the space shuttle in the Los Angeles River. Bruce Campbell and Hilary Swank are the command crew for the space shuttle. That sequence is as good as anything in any of these films. It's so awesome. It is this photoreal spaceship coming down, Los Angeles River. It looks kind of like a runway from the sky, but when you get down there's bridges and there's stuff everywhere. It's not even a river, it's this canal, because they've done away with any sort of the city has done away with any sort of natural thing that might surround it. I love that sequence, so I'm giving that sequence a shout out. The rest of it is extremely corny. Let's build a machine to go to the center of the Earth. I love that for a different reason. That's fun, old, journey to the center of the Earth sort of craziness. You almost wouldn't be surprised if they got down there and there were dinosaurs and stuff living. So even though it starts out in a very realistic and believable way, it ends in a really preposterous and ridiculous place. But I find the very just very enjoyable as long as you can make that switch with it when it changes. It's the first movie that uses the term unobtainium in it, which is an actual scientific term.
I saw this movie once.
That scientists use when they want to prove a hypothetical.
Right.
They use that term as, this is the thing that we don't know what it is yet that solves all our problems. They named that unobtainium back in like the 70s. So the ship that goes to the center of the Earth is made out of unobtainium.
I've seen the film once, and it was not a memorable experience. I remember it was one of those popcorny. I enjoyed it while I'm watching it, but
sure, and that is all it is.
10 minutes, I'm like, I don't need to see that again. But I do like the cast, you know, and it's
Hilary
it's one of
Swank,
those-
Bruce Greenwood, and Aaron Eckhart is kind
Yeah.
of the star in it, but it really is an ensemble film. Stanley Tucci's fantastic in it. Checky Caro, the French actor, is really, really good. Delroy Lindo, who creates the machine, you know, and there's also this terrible subplot about this. They hire this computer hacker to like trick the world's media into none of these
Hack the
terrible
earth.
things that are happening.
Who directed this?
One of the I get them mixed up. He's going to tell us one of the Johns with no H, John Emile or John Avnet. I think Emile.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it is a name.
John A. They're different guys. I always forget which one's what.
Yeah,
I think it's John Emile. John Emile.
Okay.
Who directed Entrapment and some other very enjoyable films. You know,
So
but
speaking of things,
it's not
happening
great. I
to
just
the
wanted to get it
Earth,
on because I like it better than, like I say, some of these others that are kind of the same kind of movie that we're going to talk about soon.
Yeah.
So in terms of in films that where bad things happen to the Earth by the Earth, and we end up paying the price for it. Michael, your number 4 film, San Andreas.
Yes.
Little LA centric.
Shut up, Ryan Harris. This is another one of, but this is, I'm going to reach through this thing and smack you. One, Rock is a very engaging leading man. He's extremely attractive. He's got great, dimples, and he sells it. But the thing that helps to sell this film for me is Carla Gugino. I think she's an extremely underrated actress. I don't know why she hasn't won 5,000 million awards, because she's so good. And the sequence where she's with Kylie Minogue in the high rise, I mean, she sells it. The ridiculousness of everything through every moment of this film, she sells it. But my big problem with this film, even though I think it's exciting and I love it and it's a great journey, shut up, Ryan Harris, is Giamatti's line deliveries in every single.
Giamatti's the best.
No,
San Andreas.
It's terrible when he tries to do the really serious stuff. Every time I'm like, just send me back.
If Giamatti wasn't in it,
biceps,
given those little lines in the first part of the movie would only be about 4 people. That's what sucks about San Andreas is that it's this big. Its scope of story is this big. Its destruction is unlimited.
That's what I paid for.
But the story is this teeny tiny preposterous thing where only one character you really know goes into a skyscraper, and only one character you really know survives the skyscraper. It at every chance it gets, it defies any sort of normal storytelling logic. It totally eschews the ensemble nature of these stories, which is pretty much what's great about every one of them. That's great.
I agree that it does, because it's a.
I do like Ian Grufford.
It's not a contained film. You can't have that kind of ensemble with a contained film. This is epic. It goes across the entire state of California, so you can't have that. But you do get the pockets. You do get the pockets.
4 people. You've got a big tidal wave sequence, one of the better sequences in the movie, because the action really is great. The helicopter stuff, like, I can't deny that. And Carla and The Rock are fine. It's not them. It's whoever put this film together. Their idea that okay, now a tidal wave's coming, and the only way to beat a tidal wave, you're in a boat. One of our later movies shows this as well, is to go at it. You can't outrun it. You will get toppled and destroyed once it crests on top of you. The only way to do it is to go at it and hope you get over the top of the thing before it crests and destroys everything.
Yeah.
And there are, 100 boats doing this same thing, everybody in the harbor, but only The Rock's
Of course.
over
of course
the wave.
That's how it works. Plus,
That's not
he has
how it works.
biceps for days.
Then don't show the other boats then.
No, it's
with actual sailors in them that actually have powerful
I will
engines.
give you this. It is stupid and the story is flimsy, but I love it. It's exciting. The performances are strong, and I'm engaged enough. I guess this is one of those times when it's like, you know what, I'll let it go. But you do have the history of the dead daughter and the current daughter and the douchebag new boyfriend and all of that. There's enough of it.
I do love the new boyfriend part. Ian Gruffett, I could have just watched with him murder people to stay alive for like hours, because that dude is Weasley awful person, and like the way he turns survivalist extraordinaire when the world starts falling apart is almost like hilarious. But again, he was the only other character the movie's following at a certain point. They accidentally bump into their kids in a high-rise building in San Francisco after it's flooded. They just randomly find them in all the chaos. It's just it's one stupid thing after another.
Yes.
And it's too much for me. It is still fun. I watch it. I've seen it a couple times. It's an accomplished movie in its destruction and stuff. The characters are cool enough to spend time with, but there's nothing in it. Everything in it strains credibility. Everything in it is Hollywood stupidity. And it's exactly what you were complaining about last week, mate. You were like, why don't they care about anybody except these 4 people in the movie?
The point I'm going to make is that I would love to do some kind of a test to see, when I sit down for a film, what did I eat that day? What's my blood pressure? What's my sugar level? Because there are certain movies like San Andreas, which, regardless of the fact that the story is flimsy crap, I love the hell out of it. I still love the hell out of it. I'll rewatch it. But is that because my sugars were a little lower that day and I let the story go because that's the way my body accepted it? I don't know. So
we all do that.
I'm a complex movie watcher, Ryan Harris and Joel Listman. That's it.
What did Joel do? He's just been sitting there grinning.
I'm loving this. I'm having so much fun. One thing that The Rock could have benefited from is a sequence of numbers that would have alerted him to the fact that this disaster
that would have made
was
it more
going to
believable.
happen. Yep. Which brings us to our number 4 film on Ryan's list, the Nicolas Cage epic, Knowing.
Okay, to be fair, this movie has all the same problems as
San Andreas.
Yeah, but in this movie, the end of the world is sneaking up on humanity, basically. So it is a little bit different. It's not like all hell breaks loose. All these little mini disasters happen on the way to a trip to the end of the world. It really is a disaster movie, though, because that plane crash sequence, subway crash, these are, because it's almost not a disaster movie, but it is, because those really are the big pieces of the movie, if you will, and they are disaster sequences. But what's great about Knowing isn't that, honestly. It's all the other stuff. The discovery of what this little mathematical thing, there's a guy who brings his kid to school on a day when they're opening a time capsule from the 60s, and everybody's put something in it, and his son gets one of the things. Each student gets something from a student, years before. And it's just it's just back and forth covered with numbers. And Nicolas Cage plays a physicist who brings this home, starts to analyze it, starts to see dates, basically. There's a pattern in these numbers. And the pattern basically predicts, without going into the details, it predicts the end of the world. And he spends the bulk of the movie trying to figure out why and trying to prevent it from happening. Big spoiler alert for Knowing, everybody. So this is truly ruins the whole thing. So I'm giving you a second to mute me or whatever, however you were enjoying this.
Skip ahead.
Okay, you got to give me about 10 seconds. Go. The best thing about Knowing is it's an end of the world movie where the world actually comes to an end. Okay, end spoilers. I love that about it. I really do, because even though the movie's a little corny, I was sort of gobsmacked by the fact that that's where it went with its story, because you really feel like your hero is going to find a way out of this. But in this case, your hero is Nicolas Cage, and he's a scientist. He's not The Rock. So he's not going to save only 2 people that he cares about.
He just doesn't have the biceps. I'm sorry.
He does not have the biceps. He does have he's got some great Nick Cage line readings, even though he plays this movie
straight. Yeah.
He's not obnoxious in it at all. But when he's deciphering it, and it means something, and he's got this, Ma, which from Nick is, gold. So you do get one of those in the movie, but go ahead, Michael.
We revisited this week knowing that you were going to have it on your list, and it was a contender for my list, except that despite the fact that there are some incredible disaster sequences, that subway thing is out of control.
Really horrific.
Out of control.
Truly horrific.
I don't think this is a disaster film.
Yeah,
So
fair enough.
It's not, I wouldn't put it on this list because I did look at it again only the second time I saw it, but it holds up. There's some really, and it's also an extremely creepy movie.
I agree.
The Swedish men, whatever,
Swedish
wandering around
gentlemen.
the house property,
Yeah, they are creepy.
But it's a really interesting thing. I think Rose Byrne, another very underrated actress, puts in a really great performance. And this is another one of those, like I mentioned 2 weeks ago, earthquake things. Having only seen it once, I'm watching this. I get to the halfway point. I'm like, I don't know where this. I don't remember what happens here. I'm getting aging.
Well,
I don't know, but it's
it's not. I don't think the movie is partly responsible for that, Michael. It might be you, and we can blame you for not remembering any of the ending of it. But the highlight of the movie is him figuring out this mystery, and these two random crazy encounters he happens. Once we're barreling towards Armageddon, it isn't as interesting a film. It's not bad. It gets you to the end, but the last third of it isn't anywhere near as good as the first 2/3, in my opinion.
Well, I thought the ending, because again, I didn't remember this, but the actual epilogue, not the actual ending, but
right.
I'm like, it's a little heavy-handed. I get it. I see what you're going for, but you maybe could have been a little more subtle. I don't know. Even though it looked very pretty, you know what I mean? But I don't know. But it's still a really solid movie.
There's a science versus faith theme that runs through it. There's a thing about grief and parenthood. It's really well thought out film, directed by Alex Proyas, who did Dark City. Is that what it was called? Dark.
Which I also revisited in the past 6 months.
Roger Ebert's favorite film of the 90s.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and we talked about his cheap tax write-off movie is Gods of Egypt, has some decent stuff in it. He's a good filmmaker, and this was a good film. Ryan Pearson, I want to say, wrote it, and he's a clever writer. He's one of those guys who's written and sold 100 scripts, but they've only produced 2 of them. And somebody's always attached to his next project, but then it just doesn't happen. So there's a lot of those screenwriters lurking in Hollywood.
It's a good film. I just don't consider it a disaster film.
That's fair. I think it is ultimately, but it's hard. It is a hard one to peg. That's part of the delight of it. So I can't really argue with you there.
So do you guys remember when the world was supposed to end in 2012? Because that's when the Mayans said it was going to end.
I remember that. That's when the Mayans calendar runs out.
That's when Mayans calendar runs out.
Yeah.
Roland Emmerich remembered that too, and he took advantage of it in coming in a couple years early to really try to scare everybody. But his movie 2012
in November, a November release, which is unusual for a movie of this kind.
2009.
Yeah.
I'm preparing myself for the Ryan argument because
I don't.
No,
you won't. It won't be nearly as painful for this film. I don't.
I also. I mean, I am a fan of the Emmerich disaster films. I'll say it. Not all of them, and certainly something like Independence Day. It's does not hold up well as far as some of the crap because it's just so cheesy.
Welcome
and
to Earth.
2012 has plenty of that. But again,
of it.
Did I have an extra slice of apple that day? Is that why I liked 2012? Because it is another one that I will revisit and enjoy over and over again. I think Cusack's great in the lead role.
I agree.
All the supporting cast is good. I love the Russian subplot.
Because it's not a particularly well-written film, and Cusack, Amanda Peet, Chiwetel Ejiofor, there's a whole host of actors that actually come off pretty great in it, and they're doing a lot of heavy lifting on behalf of the movie.
Well, I think one of the things I really like about this film, I love these films where Group A, Group B, Group C, and they all, as I feel, organically merge and come together. Obviously,
Truly.
story helps them get there, but
a little,
I
that's
like
a little
Roland
forced,
Emmerich
but
loves that
still,
stuff. Yeah,
the movie
Roland,
does the work of bringing them together in as natural a way.
I like because there's I just finished reading Romero's one of his last projects. It's The Living Dead, which Daniel Krauss finished writing for him after he died, and it's that same kind of thing. It's like all these people from all these different places, and then they all kind of filter together. And I think it's hard to get right because you have a lot of people and a lot of personalities and plots that you gotta make work. And 2012, I think, does it, you know, and the fact that it ends up being an absolute crazy ass sci-fi futuristic Noah's Ark, I love it.
Me too. I didn't see it. That's a surprise. I didn't see it going that direction, and that was pretty cool and pretty well realized visually. The destruction in 2012, more than any other movie that we were talking about or will talk about, is the biggest, grandest, most just stunningly high scale, big scope stuff. It has not been topped since. It's been almost 10 years and no movie has, even San Andreas, which goes for the gold, it tries, it still doesn't quite capture the world-ending, pure Armageddon of 2012. And it does it, it gets repetitive. There are three, not one, not two, but three big airplane escape at the last second scenes. I find that sort of annoying, but it's getting picky because the destruction going on around is unique and different in each sequence. It's just a huge scale destructive thing.
Well, because San Andreas is technically localized. You know, this is everywhere.
To the extreme, I would say.
There's two sequences.
Only your neighbors survive and everyone else dies.
Exactly.
Or isn't worth paying attention to in the slightest.
There's two sequences in 2012 that always stand out to me is when they're getting ready, I think they're getting ready to land. They're in the plane and they're getting ready to land in China, but the entire globe has shifted. So I'm like, that's
the surface of the crust of the earth has shifted, so all their maps
and it's also notable that, you know, actor Johan Erb is the hot Russian blonde pilot. But anyway, I digress. But the other sequence I think is really
who goes out like a champ. That guy's a hero.
He does. He's awesome and he's hot.
I agree.
So, but the other sequence I think is really great, and it was kind of iconic in all of the ad campaigns, is the monk up in the Himalayas. You know,
really,
just by
really just a few shots, but yes.
And you see it coming. I'm like, there's.
Well, that was the
mine is definitely the single prop or double prop plane escaping California when it hits.
Yeah,
come on.
I mean,
background.
The how depth is handled in that, and how the earth falling out from underneath you, it just that, you know. To me, that's the sequence to end all sequence. Happens early in the film,
but this also has a good sense for me, and I guess I get my technical meter on gauging disaster films is I did have multiple times in this film that what I'll call that chest anxiety and oh my God, humanity.
Oh yeah, those poor old guys, the jazz guys on the cruise ship.
Yeah.
And
see, that's touching when he's having his call with his son.
You bet.
It's good. It's good. And, you know, George Siegel, let's have a drink.
Or when the other one sees him have a drink after being an alcoholic who's sober for decades. And he's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, it doesn't matter at this point. Yeah, 2012, I think, is just a really, really enjoyable. And one more quick thing and I'll shut up, is I had a friend who, when we talked about the term disaster porn, this was the film that he's like, he called me out on it. It's like, why would you like this? And I'm like, well, because I do, you know.
It is. It is disaster porn. The characters, although it sacrifices a lot of named and characters with history to the disaster in a very brave and almost unlikable way. There were at least two moments in the film where I was mad at the movie. I'm like, you need to do that. That's mean. But you know, that's what happens in these big moments or whatever. I mean, I get it. So in a way, I have the balls to do that. You know, Woody Harrelson is really cool, takes up a whole lot of the film.
Agreed.
He's entertaining, but he takes some of the bleak seriousness away from it. That's probably what his job is, honestly.
Yeah.
But that annoys me a little bit. I think the president, spoiler alert, but I think the president going down with the ship is stupid. And you see how short-sighted and stupid it is when, without his leadership, Danny Glover plays the president in this film, you see that it's left to the idealist and the pragmatist to fight it out when a big decision needs to be made. And you really don't want Spock and McCoy making all the decisions on the ship. You really do need a Captain Kirk to do the right thing, to weigh all sides. Maybe that's the point it's trying to make, you know. I like that Chiwetel's character is reading a book that failed to sell that John Cusack wrote.
Yeah.
That's corny, but there's thematic richness in that they are able to explore that I like.
Well, the only thing I'll say too is it kind of in the very last moment treads into that volcano stupid ending territory of political correctness.
Yeah.
You know, when they kind of come out and everything's good and Africa survived. I'm like, okay.
We're all going to be Africans now.
You
united
didn't spell it out,
bright,
but it was like, you're maybe pushing the line a little bit into the cheese factor. But I mean, one other quick thing I want to say is I love that there are secondary characters that have journeys. The Russian mobster guy, he sacrifices himself for his children, and that's actually a really harrowing moment. And I kind of was surprised by things like that. You know, it's because the movie is so vast, but
his mistress sacrifices herself for other people's children.
Yeah, so there are things.
It's a harsh movie in that way. You know?
Yeah, but I like that film a lot.
Well, good. Well, next up is a movie that Ryan and I have championed before on this show, but we will, on our podcast. But let's talk a little bit about 2014's Pompeii.
I think Michael should see Pompeii. I think as far as disaster movies go, it's got a truly novel approach.
Yeah. Which
is really just, let's set it during the Roman Empire, during Pompeii. That doesn't need much more than that, because if you read a little bit about that volcano eruption and what happened to known civilization at the time, it was one of the first cataclysmic earth events that was actually written down and cataloged to some degree by human beings. We know of ones that happened earlier, but that one, and then even more so the Krakatoa eruption, where people were writing things and keeping ship's logs and writing letters to each other, and this eruption is chronicled by that. And I just think, even aside from that, the destruction in it is great. It's very big scale Roman Emmerich style destruction. That's fantastic. But it, like with a volcano film, you can only start the big ending when you start the big ending. The rest of your movie has to be something else.
Sure.
And this film's got just a good in on that. It's the story of a kidnapped, who's brought life as a slave and a gladiator, who's brought to Pompeii to fight it out, and the story of the governors of Pompeii sort of competing with and trying to survive when this emissary relishingly villainous emissary played by Kiefer Sutherland comes to visit them and and really wants the place for himself, is pretty much going on. That's good. It's all cheap late night B movie stuff, but it's very expensive, and it's all, maybe not all of it, but virtually all of it is played with that straight face. Joel and I talked about that's really the strength of this film, is that you'd never ever, even in 2012 and all these other, you never ever catch Pompeii winking at you. And I really do think that is what carries you to the end of it, because it's no less cheesy than the other ones we're talking about. But
sure,
the period settings are really nice. Before it gets digital and shows you the city and pulls the camera way back, and it's not going to build a city. Before that, the wagons, the horses, the trees, the places that they travel to are shot just beautifully. Like it's kind of a beautiful film. And Kit Harington without a shirt on is nice. And
I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry, I wasn't listening. What? No, I'm kidding.
Yes, a lot of that. a lot
frankly,
gladiators being oiled up for
of
their big
gladiators,
moments.
a lot of dudes running around without shirts
And I keep
on.
forgetting her name. Who's the daughter in that? Carrie Ann Moss and Jared Harris's daughter.
It is.
She's great.
Emily Browning.
Emily Browning doesn't do very many good movies. I don't know that this necessarily qualifies one, but she's always good when she shows up. No. And the young lady who plays her servant and friend is pretty good too. So.
Okay, so this movie just completely flew under the radar because
it came out in March. It's a big hit.
I vaguely remember the ad campaign.
The ad campaign says, "Brought to you by the people who made the Resident Evil movies," which is hardly a selling point for it.
Wow. Who directed this?
Paul W.S. Anderson.
Oh, he did. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that gives me a little pause, even though I enjoyed the Resident Evil.
I think you need a little pause. I think you should see this, but I do think you do need a little okay. I don't think you should dive in thinking it's going to, like we were pitching Hindenburg hardcore because we thought that's enjoyable on so many levels. Like even if he thinks it's corny, he's going to have a good time at that.
Yeah.
Pompeii, be a little careful with. If you think it's going to be the greatest thing ever, you probably won't enjoy it. It's not. It's really good for what it is.
Cast and obviously good production.
Yeah. Well, and Carrie Ann Moss, Jared Harris, these people didn't show up to vamp it up. They play this all for real, and it really helps. Kiefer vamps it up a little bit, and there's some more eccentric side characters who are able to be a little corny, but mostly it's.
Yeah, one of the things that makes Pompeii a bit different is because the disaster. Like there's no like big scenes where it's like, this is coming, please listen to me, this is coming, we all have to be prepared, and then people going, nah, forget that guy. It's everyone's just going about their lives, and in this case there's these plots and
the signs are there, but
they don't understand.
People are like,
I agree, Joel.
They're like that.
There's
that
Cassandra forecasting the end of the world that nobody's listening to, and it does really help that there isn't.
Like the chick in Milwaukee and Hindenburg.
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, I brought that up when we talked about Hindenburg. She gets is she a psychic or something?
All right, so let's move on to number 2. I would say this is I'm going to go ahead and say it. This is a controversial pick for number 2. This is on Michael's list. World War Z. Yeah. This was a lot of offline discussion going on, but World War Z and
not about the quality of World War Z. Just
not about the quality of the film.
Just trying to decide whether it goes here or not. In many, many ways it does. In some ways it doesn't. But here it is.
I still, even at this moment, am not certain whether I think it's a disaster film because, of course, you guys know me being the zombie guy. This is a zombie movie, and 28 Days Later is a zombie movie. I don't care that they're infected.
Until the last act, it's not a horror movie in any sort of conventional sense either. So what else would you call it?
I guess, an infected, I don't know. But I think it's a reasonable...
It's a zombie movie. Is it, the question, that's not a genre. That's a subgenre. Is it a horror movie or is it a disaster movie? And I think it's more of a disaster movie.
I think this particular description just calls it an apocalyptic action horror film. It's like, well, let's just throw all sorts of adjectives on
Of course.
Right.
But you know what? It's interesting because this is a movie that I will rewatch if it comes up. And of course I own it. I genuinely like this film.
I watch it once a year on the anniversary of its release.
My last time watching, I had a few problems where it's not a good performance from Pitt. There are moments in there I'm like, you're just not good. You're not good. But the action is fantastic. Some of those set pieces, like in Jerusalem, the opening sequence, I think they're in Detroit. I'm like, this is rough. This is rough. But as we've probably
they're in Philadelphia, by the way.
Philadelphia. But it's those moments in any of these films or in zombie or apocalyptic films where that thin thread of humanity and animal just is broken in one street corner, and seeing things like that happen is so upsetting to me in so many ways. And World War Z, that sequence when they're trying to get out of town, man, it is terrifying. And then they get stuck in the damn high rise with that
stuff in the
family.
grocery store, even, when civilization, that's the great thing about zombie movies. That's what zombies represent, is the collapse of civilization,
Yeah.
or rather the fear of having all the things that you count on in life taken from you and suddenly being the enemy of you and trying to destroy you. That's why there's always a mailman zombie and a nurse zombie.
Sure.
It's not just because it's partly because our movie's cheap and what costumes do we have that we can put on
Sure.
these zombies. It's, you need to see those visual representations of those institutions with which your life revolves around, coming at you, trying to eat your brains. That's part of what gets under your skin about it. And this film manages to hammer that home on a scale that has yet to be, and probably won't be, from a zombie perspective, beaten. It's just, the scale of it is so huge. You mentioned Philadelphia, and certainly Jerusalem sequence, and that soldier that he picks up as a sidekick in Jerusalem is one of my favorite side characters, really, of any movie ever. She's so, and she hardly says anything. But
no, she's a powerful.
She's so, once you're like, oh, she's gonna. There's a part where she should be dispatched in a normal movie, and once you realize, oh, she's gonna keep going with us. Once she takes that extra step into that keep going zone, I'm like, better not kill her, movie, or I'm going to be mad. I'm going to be mad at you, and I'm going to take it personally. And I love feeling like that. You know what I mean?
Well, and speaking of that right after that is the other big set piece, which is the plane sequence, which is also horrifying in every way.
You can't fight zombies. You can fight snakes on a plane, but you cannot fight zombies on a plane. You just flat out can't do it. And so it's a huge problem. It needs a drastic, ridiculous solution.
For our viewing pleasure.
World War Z has a clever ending, given that the ending was completely rewritten and reshot months after the film was finished.
Yeah.
It has a very small and very thinking person sort of Twilight Zone ending for a film that's as massive and huge as it is. Damon Lindelof was brought in. Basically, they said, well, this isn't working. Can you help us fix this? And he's like, okay. So one thing he did was he took what they had and he shuffled it around and did some stuff to it and said you could reshoot a little bit here. And then the other thing he did, which is his own initiative, he wasn't asked to do this, was he just wrote a whole new ending for the film and said, or you could just, for probably the same amount of money, because there's no air invasion, there's no paratroopers, there's no massive mounds of, you could probably just do this and here's a whole different ending. And they took his ending.
Well,
but the book has a off the hook, crazy, huge, awesome ending that the film now no longer has. And if you're familiar at all with the book, is a little weird and frustrating. Also, you can't fly from Jerusalem to wherever they're going, Moscow, and accidentally land in the British Isles. That's physically impossible.
No,
and the British Isles have never looked more like Siberia than they do in World War Z.
Well, the thing about World War Z is it's got its problems. I mean,
it was a huge problematic production that somehow turned into a kind of awesome movie.
That's what I'm saying. It's like when this was first announced, it's like, oh my God, and problems and reshoots and delays and all this crap. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be awful. And so I kind of went in with that mindset, like, okay, I'm not expecting much. But it delivered. It delivered big time for me. And like I said, it's now, if it's on, I'm going to watch. It's certainly that opening sequence. It's like, yeah, I'm in.
And Muriel Enos, you want to give a shout out to her? She's fantastic in it.
Well, I have a personal connection to her.
I'm aware of that. But no, aside, she's really just good. A decent actor that we have a personal connection to. She is flat out awesome in almost everything that she does.
No, she's a fantastic actor.
No different than in this.
It is
she's
one of the
really, really
dumbest character put in danger without meaning to moments with the damn satellite phone. I'm like, bitch, wait for him to call you. That was probably the agreement, because now you just screwed it up. And
those satellite phones have mute buttons and off switches. Maybe the genius UN health organizer should have thought of that before he went into a place with a bunch of zombies. And also, real quick before we move on, David Morse has a great cameo. It's not a cameo, but a great bit part.
Yeah.
And James Badge Dale, the commander of that station, who has already given the zombies code name Zeke.
Yep.
Remember when you got to shoot Zeke and put Zeke down, and then at the end, oh my God, I'm a Zeke. Something about James Badge Dale and military lingo makes me smile.
Yeah, World War Z, whether or not it's a zombie disaster or a disaster zombie, it's a solid, enjoyable movie.
It is both. I mean, no question. But
it's a good
I think
film,
in a discussion with a conventional zombie film, I really do think it fits better with these movies than those, in my opinion. But maybe only slightly so.
Well, when we have Michael back on for our zombie film extravaganza,
he has to leave it out.
Well,
We've
let me
characterized
say,
it. He's got to leave it out.
if you guys have a zombie episode and you don't invite me, we're done.
Why don't we just one day, why don't we just say, here, talk about zombies, and we'll just take the week off.
Yep, and
you can just talk about zombies for an hour and 20 minutes.
But I don't have anything to say about them, and I have no knowledge.
Yeah, I'll just put pictures of Ryan and I, or we'll just have our it'll just be that for me. And then go Michael, go. No, seriously, I'm here, Michael. Just don't worry. I'm listening.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
All right, so let's move on to. Hey, you guys remember when we were talking about how The Rock was the only one who could get up over the wave?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I do.
The number 2 movie on Ryan's list.
Oh yeah.
Probably has to do with one of those boats that
Big
really
waves.
wanted to make it up over the wave.
The Perfect
And that's
Storm.
The Perfect Storm.
Another Wolfgang Peterson movie, the second one on this list. Roland Emmerich isn't the only guy with 2 movies on our.
He likes boats.
He does. He really does. He is a seafaring
That's gonna be the quote.
fellow.
That's the quote from this.
He also
episode.
likes giant flying cocker spaniels, as we know. I think this might be his best movie. It's one of his best movies. I really like Perfect Storm a lot. It's a little corny, but that's only because you think it's a lot corny.
Oh.
Well,
go on.
Maybe for the kind of movie it is a lot corny, but it's not a lot corny compared to 2012. That's what I'm saying. It's a true life story about these fishermen who got caught in the convergence of 2 of the biggest storms that the North Atlantic's ever seen, right as they were coming together. And of course, we don't really know the details of how they were lost at sea, but the film tries to dramatize those events for you and tries to give these people a backstory and such. And it's really not a conventional disaster in that point, except that when the storm comes, it really is the volcano in Pompeii, and it really is a disaster that you're a part of, and you're trying to survive it. So of all the rescue movies that I left off my list, I put this one on it because the rescue part isn't really the star of the film. It's the subplot. I like it. I like the working class stuff. I like the John Mellencamp song. I like the ones they left behind. I thought all that's handled in a pretty cool and dignified way. I like Michael Ironside always when he pops up, and Rusty Schwimmer and John Hawkes, and I just really am. It's packed full of people that I'm really excited to see. Plus, an older Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio doing pretty good work too. Okay, Michael, what's bad about it? It is a little corny. I agree. Is it Wahlberg? The Wahlberg factor?
Well, that is a big part of it. Because here, let me do my one. This is the Wahlberg expression in every film. That's it. That's all we ever get. Anyway,
he is a sort of dull working class hero that other working class heroes are able to project themselves upon. That's why he shows up in films like this. That's why he's the star of all of Peter Berg's films, because they're all basically the same story.
His best performance was The Fighter. That's it. I don't like him in anything else. And The Fighter was a meathead. So, So we saw Perfect Storm in the theater.
Who's The Fighter?
The Fighter. It's the with him and Christian Bale.
Mm-hmm. Brothers who meet.
The best Wahlberg performance. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we saw this in the theater.
I don't disagree with you. That is his best performance.
The ad campaign for A Perfect Storm 100% sold us. We were in line opening night for the theater, if I recall. I hated this film.
Hated it?
Yes. I remember walking
that's
out.
a little over the top, Michael. It's not hateable.
It is. I mean, I didn't, not hate, okay. I like Rusty Schwimmer as well. That was a big draw for me when I saw her in there. I'm like, yay. But
well, and she plays a well-rounded and interesting, different sort of character than we're used to seeing in these films too. You believe her. You believe William Fichtner's character, and to a lesser degree, who's our buddy? It's like the only name that's in this that I haven't named other than Clooney, I guess.
Well, John C. Reilly.
John C. Reilly, yeah. I like.
Okay, I mean,
I like the crew dynamics, everything.
I don't remember anything about this because I've never revisited it. I remember my feelings about it. And I remember that I walked out of the theater with the eyes in my head rolled all the way back.
But there's at least a chance that was because your expectations were so high, right?
I mean, no. I mean, I went in because it looked good. And I, from what I recall, yes, the disaster sequences and the waves were pretty effective. But I recall not liking any of these people really. So I think there's, if I recall, isn't there a lot of self-sacrifice in the end? Because
not really. They're in a hopeless situation, so there's not a lot of. They're fighting for each other and such, but there's not the reality of the bleak situation that they're in. Is there's not a lot any of them can do. You can save a guy's life for 5 or 6 minutes, but
I mean, perhaps it's time for a revisit, maybe so based on you ranking it so highly, but I do not have fond memories of this movie.
It has Cherry Jones in it.
Does have Cherry Jones.
Just saying. Maybe not enough for my taste, but she's in it. Her and Karen Allen are in it, and Dash Mihok's in it. We all like Dash. We'll hopefully hear more of him on future shows. And he's coming up on our next movie, I believe.
Yes, he is.
So I have this as second. I really like it, but I'll admit it's a big Hollywood disaster movie disguised as a small, like, working class hero drama. And if it's judged as the later, it's really not great. But the fact that it has a lot of the characteristics of a really good drama and then hits you with the big disaster at the end makes for me a cool cinematic experience. Why people wouldn't like it, but I have a hard time seeing anyone have contempt for it. That surprises me, but who knows? That's cool. That's valid. We all have those reactions to stuff. Mm-hmm. So I get it. Not criticizing you, do.
Michael's never coming back on the show.
All right, so let's go ahead and get to the number one film on Michael's list, making his second appearance on the list, Roland Emmerich, with The Day After Tomorrow.
Love this film. And I will point out right off the bat that there's some serious cheesiness that pops out when I rewatch it now. You know, the kid can't be moved from the hospital ward in D.C. Like, okay, whatever.
That is really dumb.
Oh, there's some stupid crap for sure. But I like these characters. You know, I like the Dennis Quaid character, even though this isn't one of his better performances. But I like the scope of it.
Not bad. He's asked to carry a movie. He does a pretty good job of it.
And he just, you know, for those that need to know this, he is shirtless in a couple of sequences. So
there you go.
That's important.
Shirtless, middle-aged Dennis Quaid.
Hey, man.
Hey, no wonder it's your number one.
But it's a really horrifying film to me. I mean, obviously the connotations of what was happening then and what is happening now in real life, and it really
is the melting of the ice caps. The disaster is the melting of the ice caps, changing the jet stream, and the new ice age being ushered upon us. Instead of it happening in a few hundred years, it happens in like 4 days. So that part is preposterous, but this really is it's actually a very well-researched film into what would happen, whether and climate effects that happening would be, and in that way it's a nice, in a way that 2012 is just stupid. It's a nice the Mayans. That's all we need.
Yeah.
And to be fair, that's all you need to make a Hollywood movie. Don't get me wrong. But this has a lesson in the disaster of it, which should be dumb and is even kind of. But Quaid's character, the way he deals with the government not cooperating with it, the way he deals with his fellow scientists in Ian Holm and what's the name of that other actor? So awesome, the guy from Primary Colors. And
yeah, I can't think of his name.
Either way, those guys are, that relationship and their reaction to stuff like really is the heart of the thing. The fact that he has a son who understands roughly, who's kind of smart like him and understands what's going on enough to communicate with the people around him, saves a lot of lives. Like I really, really dig. I think it's worthy. It's not even on my list really. Maybe it would have been number 5 or something, but it's a worthy number 1 because of those things, because that's extra, provides it with a lot of extra something. And those plots, the kids trapped in New York, the father trying to rescue his son, the Arctic Sea employees just having to face the end with whatever dignity they can muster. Those bits are all as well done in a film like this as you're likely to get. So there is a lot to like in it. I'll let you finish before I tell you the things I can't stand about it.
No, I mean, I like the characters. I like the father's sacrifice. I like the performances overall. And if you put Celia Ward in anything, when I met her, I told her, I see your name in a credit, and automatically whatever the project is going to be better. I think she's also just a severely underrated actor. Yeah. And, even in a smaller role like this, like the moment where she, I think, talks to Quaid on the phone and kind of breaks down, you got to make sure he's okay. And I'm like, yes, Celia, you're right. And it's also the effects in this film, I think, still hold up.
Forerunner to the huge effects in 2012, but still destructive effects on the scale of which we had never seen in a film before.
Well, the title,
they really are
coming
incredible.
into New York and over the
all the tiny little buses and cars and the streets from the aerial views of bumping into each other, like that level of detail on that scale with the camera pulled back that far.
Well, the thing that's interesting,
it's first of a kind in that way. It's amazing.
The fact too that this has all the tropes of self-sacrifice, Jay, who we will get to in a moment, but like but then also it also has the tropes of just stupid actions, like Emmy Rossum's character helping out, the French tourist that's trapped in the cab, and the way
that's stupid.
Coming. Well, I know we want to set up the characters as good.
It's nothing to do with the character. If you see somebody you need to save or that you can try and help, you should help.
Because
some people are just like that.
There are plenty of other characters who would pass it by and self-serve and save themselves.
But not everybody. That's the point of the scene.
I'm saying the fact that we're getting it highlighted in this film, it is one of those disaster.
Only the character we know would do the right thing in this situation. I sort of get that, but
it's so, I mean, it has all of those things, but I forgive all of them because of the insane spectacle of this film.
And everybody committing to it. Again, again, a recurring theme that we talk about is as performers, you absolutely commit to the realism of it all. Real quick, one of the
principles go ahead.
I was just saying, one of the things that I enjoy.
It shows. I didn't know you had something to say. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, one of the things that I like is that we also see in this film, where we don't necessarily see it, is we see people making rational decisions that end up being the wrong decision. People are like, like, well, we have to go. We can't stay here. And by all logic, you're like, you could. It's an easy sequence of logic to go. Yeah, it's like, okay, well, we need to move. We need to get somewhere. Staying put doesn't seem like the right thing to do.
Brad Pitt says it in World War Z. I've been through situations like this before, and the one rule is if you don't move, you die.
Yep.
Yeah,
And that's
that's
a reasonable way for a human psyche to react to a disaster. So.
and we get that where people are like, I gotta go. I have to be an active, I have to be an active member of trying to save myself. And I don't know if that necessarily is an American thing or if that's a human thing, but we see that in this movie, and we see people, obviously because it's not our principal characters, we know that it is the wrong choice to make. But
and we know because the scientist has told the vice president, and the vice president's refused to tell America until it's too late. So it's even more than that. We really do know that they're doing the right thing at the time, even though what the others are suggesting, sort of a reverse of what happens in the Poseidon films, is perfectly reasonable. It's still wrong.
But I think
he's drawn that line across America, Dennis Quaid. He says, evacuate the people below this line. And they're like, what about the people above the line? We're all above the line. And he's like, it's too late for those people. Well, tell them to hunker down, burn whatever they can, and hopefully maybe some of them can rise. It's a horrifying moment. And of course, politically, that's not a that you can make. And the reality of the situation is it's not a speech you can even wait 10 minutes to make. You got to tell them now, and they don't. That inaction is a part of the death of the cataclysmic death of so many. And I really like what's at the core of Day After Tomorrow quite a bit. But there's so many things on the fringes of it that are just awful that they do really bring down the film to me. I'll wait.
Anything more, Michael, that you want to talk about before?
Well, no, I like the details that Emmerich puts in it, because you're talking about these people that leave the library and then you see them an hour and a half later, and you know it's them because I think the guy had a scarf or a hat or something. And it's a nice little bit of storytelling. The same with like the wolves. It's like you see the wolves are gone. They got out of the cage at the zoo. Okay. And
first
then,
you see that the wolves are fake, and then you see that they're super fake, and then you see that they're super duper fake.
My point being,
that film, for all its digital wonders, did not master the art of the digital wolf, and no one has yet.
It was too early. But the point is, they set a lot of nice little things up that come back, and I think that that's always good storytelling, whether it's a cheesy callback.
Even if it is a cheesy callback, it's kind of appreciated.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
And I think it's nice to have the closure of that group.
There's plenty of that in your writing, and I always enjoy it very much. I like that. I like good writing, even if it is a little too convenient or a little too whatever. I really, really like it. It's a sign of
what are you
writing.
Saying? I'm sorry.
I'm agreeing with you.
So as we talked about in the beginning of the film,
looked horrible, but I'm agreeing with you about the rest of that. That's totally true.
As we talked about in the beginning of the film, I was able to talk to my friend Jay Sanders about this film as well as Daylight. So one thing that is important it is a spoiler, but Jay Sanders' character dies dies nobly.
I should say. And so kind of the screen definition of the noble death, I would say.
Yeah. So we talked a bit about that. So you're gonna hear him talking about that. First, we're gonna talk about the opening scene of the film,
which is striking,
and how he booked the film.
Old friend of mine who's a screenwriter and director, Holly Goldberg Sloan, with me, who I'd done a couple of kids' films with. She called them and said, "Oh, you've got to use my friend Jay." And the next thing I knew, I had an offer to do that role. And I read the script and I went, "Whoa, kick-ass death scene, hang out, be the nice guy, play around, and then kick-ass death scene." And I thought, what could be better for this kind of thing? Now, I happened to have been in Antarctica when I was 18 years old. I worked on a research vessel for 2.5 months. So that's a whole other thing. And I walked in and they tried to say, "So now, do you know what this is?" And I went, "Oh yeah, those are ice core samples. You keep those in the freezer and you do this." And they're like looking at me like, "Who is this guy?"
Yeah.
I said, "Been there, done that." And the opening scene of that, if you remember, is me and Dennis Quaid and Dash Myhawk, the kid, and we're coming from taking those samples, and something starts rumbling, and we go, whoa, what's going on? And we run out from the trailer, and we see the big divide. And, well, here's the setting. They put us in this gear that we've done, the big coat, and it's warm. Of course, you walk into the studio, it's like 80 degrees. And Roland is there with a T-shirt and jeans and hand down his pants going like, yeah, this will be good, everybody just breathe hard because, you'd be working very hard, and then there's this big blue tarp, which they put out, which like a group of 5-year-olds playing, okay, that tarp is going to be like the deepest thing you ever saw, we're going to jump over it, except we're grown men doing this together in Canada Goose outfits.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, and he did also talk about
that opening is great. It's everything he says. It's fun, it's dangerous, it's surprising, and it sets up those 3 characters who we like a lot.
That fly-in over the ice shelf is
just the opening credits. The music's good. The 3D credits are cool.
Is it
flying
James
over
Newton
the
Howard?
L show?
Is he the composer?
Yeah. Who?
Is it Newton Howard?
No, it's some other guy. Holger.
It's Harold Closer.
Harold Closer. Yeah.
I actually really like the score to that film too. Yeah.
It's good. I mean, the score is functional, but it has that one theme that we're introduced to right at the beginning. We don't get that a lot anymore. Long credit sequences, scenery, music. This movie gives us that, and I think it wins because of it. So.
And it gives you the promise of Celia Ward.
That's true.
And it does. Real quick though, he also talked about a part that I cut out for time is it was super cold in Montreal when they filmed it, and they had all of this full equipment, and then like you said, it was like 80 degrees in there. So after they would do a take, wardrobe would have to run in and essentially mop those guys off with towels just because they were sweating so much.
I'm sure.
And then they would start again because they're in these under the lights and everything, they're super hot. So all right, so now we're gonna move ahead to his big death scene. All right.
The first day, I remember coming out to the set, and they had painted this set within an inch of its life. And some guy comes over and he said, "This is like $250,000 worth of set." $250,000. Well, we get there and we try some angles, and Roland Emmerich, who I loved, just went, "Yeah, no, paint it blue. We'll fix it later." So they did this thing, but they strung me up. They had me like 50 feet in the air, all the way up to the top of this warehouse. The cameras, it was so cold outside, the cameras were freezing up. I mean, that's got to be really cold. It's like actually doing it in the Arctic or something. It's like 30 plus below outside. I'm all the way up, but the heat is coming up to where I am. So it's the combination of the heat, that they're hanging like a 60-pound or more weight, which was the sled. And to this day, I still don't understand why they made it that heavy, because the audience can't tell as long as it's hanging. And it messed with my back.
Yeah, he goes on to talk about how it did really mess with his back. He spent essentially 4 days of hanging all the way up there, and then another day where they where he releases, and but that was just like enough to fall out of frame. And that one wasn't traction. Yeah, he did say it messed with his back quite a bit. He's not a small man. He's a big guy.
Yeah, he's a big guy.
And so he's like it hurt.
Day After Tomorrow, I won't dwell on what's bad about it. It's a big corny Hollywood film, but it's really it is among the sort of best kind of those. So it really is good. The wolves looking horrible really is a knock on it. That's a big part of the plot, and it doesn't fly because of fake crap effects. And it's hard to forgive those in a big expensive movie of this kind, because they had the resources to do it. They just couldn't do it, and then they couldn't think anything better to do, and that's just a failure on their part. But it's not an unforgivable failure. It's just stuff that sometimes your imagination outreaches what you can create digitally. It's good in a way. Michael already talked. The hospital and the ex-wife stand behind to stay with the cancer kid who's going to die in a couple days anyway. It's dumb, but it got its heart in the right place at least. A couple of sequences that don't are the business guys who hijacked the bus in New York. Those guys are, I don't know what they're doing there. And worst of all, and it's one of the sequences in any of these movies, it's a good presentation of the worst kind of you can have in any movie, is the destruction of Los Angeles, which includes no characters that we're aware of. It includes all the cheesy, crappy, stupid puns and humor that the rest of the movie avoids. That sequence alone knocks a star off the movie, maybe a star and a half, because it completely lacks empathy. It's as simple as that. That sequence is full of gags and jokes and visual death punchlines, and it feels like we need more destruction too. It doesn't even feel really like it's part of the same movie.
That's a legit complaint. I mean, I get it, but I mean,
the movie moves on from it in a hurry, but
they want to set up that everything's going wacky everywhere. I mean, that's the only reason. But you're right; they could have done that probably a little less without the Angeline poster and the Capitol Records.
The way everybody dies, the guy getting killed by the billboard, the guy getting crushed in his car, then the guy on the radio talking about the car being crushed, and we're all, he's talking about that guy who just got killed. And the couple making out in the skyscraper who, if they were just on the other side of the door, would have lived. Stuff like that it's really, really bad stuff. I don't know how to put it. And it's not just a bad thing. It's a pile of bad things in one sequence.
Well, there's two last things that I want to mention. One, Perry King appears as the president, which was, when I saw it, like, that's the best thing on earth. Perry King, he's working, great. Two,
he's the vacuous, good-looking president to the technocrat vice president.
Yes.
Like, actually, a very believable president-vice president relationship there.
Well, he looks exactly like Cheney. I'm sure that's not...
That's not
by coincidence. Yep.
But the bringing that up, the Cheney character is
and the Mexicans not letting us border into Mexico. It's a little.
I was just going to say we get another volcano thing at the end of this with after all these years of us not letting them in, now they have to let. I'm like, heavy-handed, but okay.
Yeah,
it's already a silly, heavy-handed movie, so that stuff plays better in this film. But I still wish it didn't have some of that, because it has a chance of being really, really good without it.
Yeah, Jay mentioned in my talk with him, he said that got the biggest reaction in the entire audience was when Mexico wouldn't let the Americans in.
My audience as well.
Everyone in the audience was like, oh my God. And so anyway, let's move on to to Ryan's number one film, which is, I mean, this is a tough film for me. I have a tough time with this film. Called The Impossible.
This film's almost unfair because it's so far from a conventional disaster movie. It is a disaster movie. It's a tidal wave disaster movie. The whole first act literally is surviving a massive disaster. It's sort of disaster in reverse in that it keeps going when all these other movies end. When you outlived the thing, that's it. This movie shows what the aftermath of a real life disaster really, really is. And that is sort of the heart and soul of the film. And so in that way, it's a little different. It's totally based on a true story. It's totally shot photorealistic. There's no dumb humor in it. There are some crazy coincidences, but apparently they're based on real life good luck or bad luck, depending on how you want to look at it, that these characters actually had. Ewan McGregor and Naomi Watts in particular. This might be the best. She's a really good actor. This might be the best I've ever seen her. I can't remember the name of the actor, a fellow actor of hers who doesn't know her personally. I don't know who it is, but it's somebody. It's not this. It's somebody like Reese Witherspoon or somebody like that. Like texted her, got her number through her agent, and just wanted to thank her for that role because she thought it was played with such integrity, and you really are sort of in awe of her when you're watching it.
Well, she's Oscar.
And the tidal wave is. It's stunning. It's a big CG tidal wave, right? So it's a big CG disaster movie. Even if you look at it in other ways, that is what it is. And it's a just incredible film that, like I said, it's kind of unfair to put it here among Day After Tomorrow, which is a totally kind of different kind of movie. But I wanted to make sure people knew about it, and I'm not sure, it's not a survival movie the way we think of those. So it really is a disaster film.
I wouldn't classify it as a disaster film. I understand why.
You just call it a drama?
A drama.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, it carries the weight of a drama. The whole last half of the film is dramatic and not disaster oriented.
But so I'm on the fence. Like, of course, disaster is the entire point of the film.
It's the thing that is why there is a film, right? That's why I call it a disaster.
I would automatically place this in a drama category. That would be my first thing. But I do remember I've only seen this once, and I'm kind of with Joel. It's like, this isn't something that I was like, hey, let's watch that again. You know, it was.
Joel, you were Impossible? Come on,
Joel,
let's watch The Impossible.
You were in, we talked about this on the show briefly before, but you were in Japan when the tidal wave hit coastal.
That's right.
Japan. So
in 2011. Yeah, in 2011.
This is about the Thailand tidal wave and a British couple who's on holiday, or the American couple, played by an Australian and a British person.
I mean, and it is, it is obviously, I wasn't, nearly in the peril that this was, but it's.
You were in a country when a country was hit by a devastating disaster, and it changes everything. I've completely
forgotten about that. I now that you say, I'm like, oh Jesus, I forgot that you were there. Like, yeah. So I can see why this would be a first choice to watch. Yeah.
No, I mean, well, it's even more. I mean, more so than the idea of the tsunami, which, I mean, it's scary and everything. It's that not being able to find the kids. It's that
your phone's not working. Nothing. You can't communicate. You don't know what's going on. That being cut off from civilization again. That's terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
The Japanese tsunami ended up being more of a nuclear disaster than anything, almost a Chernobyl-like, maybe even worse disaster, which they somehow got something of a handle on, but terrifying.
Yeah.
Do you guys have the same reaction, though? Because there's a big difference between looking at something like Day After Tomorrow, which is quote-unquote fiction, and then to look at something like The Impossible, which is so harrowing, and there's that nugget in the back of your head that this happened.
Right.
This,
even if it didn't happen just like this happened to somebody.
But it adds this extra level of unease, and it's one of those things, and I think this is, we've talked about, I don't react to films in the same way anymore. Like, I get very easily worked up and upset by things. And I think this would be a perfect example. I don't think I could go back and look at this again. When I watched it initially, it's a first experience. Naomi Watts, oh my God, the 20 minutes of her just underwater and I'm like, it's complete and utter insanity, but I can't do this again.
Like Spielberg, J.A. Bayona, who directed it, keeps the camera at water level, so you are right there experiencing what she's experiencing the opposite of Day After Tomorrow, where your camera in a weather balloon, which is amazing. It really is. That's the best stuff about that movie. But this, you are disoriented. You're getting whipped around. Water is splashing in your eyes. You're down on water level, just trying to keep your head above so you don't drown. And it's just like nothing else that's ever been filmed. I think it just blows my mind.
But I think that the term disaster porn would apply more fully to The Impossible, because it is such an immersive experience. Why do you want to be in there? Day After Tomorrow is a little more fluff, Even 2012 is a little more fluff. But The Impossible...
But fluff keeps your...
That is sadistic,
Yeah, but that's why it's pornographic, too. You got to go look and see how pornography is defined. The film like Day After Tomorrow keeps you at arm's length. It deliberately does, by keep reminding you that it's a movie. 2012 does the same thing. It doesn't ruin the movie, but it doesn't want you feeling terrified. It wants you to be thrilled
Right.
And
right.
it everything it does is keeping you at arm's length from the actual disaster. You are not a part of this. And that's a big
Sure.
part of what is so cool about movies. You get to experience these things without actually experiencing them. I've said before, that's why I like grand scale entertainment. Impossible wants you to experience it like you're there and like you're going through it. And it, in that way, it stops of disaster point. It insists that you take it seriously, that there is not a lack of artistic merit contributing to your empathy. You have to, if you have any feeling at all, or if you not keeping yourself from looking away at the screen, you have to be involved in it on a personal level. And that's what I like about it. That's why it's
Sure. But that's also what makes it a more difficult experience.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It's not a fun, let's watch
No.
this 100 times.
No.
It isn't. There were a couple others of those on this list, and I get it. It isn't that. But it's you should be brave enough. It's just a movie still. You should be brave enough as an audience member, I think, if you haven't seen it, to give it a try and put yourself through that once. Because it might be pleasant or it might be difficult. It is a dirty, frustrating, tense film, but somebody somewhere went through that, and this is your chance, as much as you can in as safe a place as you can, to go through that with them. And
fair
I
warning,
recommend it in that way.
One of the things that really bothered me about this film is I'm something of a germphobe. So seeing her in this
it's a dirty
water,
gross, terrible place.
You see she's getting scrapes and open wounds. I'm like, this is making me on just a different level. Like this
if
is
Emmy
so
just would have
uncomfortable.
left that foreign couple in the cab and wouldn't have gotten cut, we wouldn't have needed any digital wolves. So let that be a lesson to you folks. It's every man for himself.
Don't help people.
Don't help people.
Don't help people. When the disaster comes, look out for yourself and no one else.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right. Well, I think that's the right note to leave the show on.
Don't help people.
Don't help people. No. Once again, Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Yay.
To talk about disaster films. We've had. This is close to 6 hours of crazy disaster film talk that we have done over the last few weeks.
We could have kept going too.
And we could continue talking about this stuff.
Well, this third episode saved all the drama too. There was some heated
really
discussion here, so that
we moved.
For the
this
listener.
is a weird. This is like Hindenburg.
Are you really not going to talk to me
Tension, the drama, for the third act. And once again, I want to thank my friend J.O. Sanders for
for sure.
For that.
But he made the
And
episode super special. Thanks, man.
Yeah, and I don't know when it's going to happen. We're trying to figure out some timing, but a little teaser is that Jay is going to come and be on our podcast, and we're going to do an entire episode with him and talk about his bonkers career, because he has been a part of the ensembles of some insanely good films. And he's always been a pretty standout member of some insane ensembles.
Yep, I would agree.
He's the definition of that guy.
That guy. He is absolutely one of that guy. And you're like, every time he shows up, you're like, well, yeah, that's a solid. That's a you're going to get a good role from it. So all right, so that will do it, I think, for this week on the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Once again, you can reach out to us at the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on Facebook. Give us a like there. At Ask Joel and Ryan on Twitter and Instagram. The Movie Show with Joel and Brian page on YouTube, where you are probably watching this right now. Check out some of the other episodes that are on there, and we will see you later. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you guys. Yay!
Yay! Bye, everybody. See you next week on the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.